decía, muy buenos días y bienvenidos todos a la presentación de este informe del despacho Amsterdam and Partners, titulado Hacienda contra el pueblo. Estoy con los autores de este informe, que son un experto en derechos humanos y un experto en política. Destaca, por ejemplo, el premio Global Advocacy al mejor litigio pro bono del año 2013 en un juicio que ganó contra las Naciones Unidas. Está también con nosotros el otro autor del informe, que es el profesor Christopher Wales, un experto internacional en fiscalidad y que fue responsable de Hacienda en los gobiernos británicos de Tony Blair y Gordon Brown entre 1997 y 2003 y que desde entonces ha asesorado a más de 20 países en torno a su política fiscal. La rueda de prensa va a ser en inglés. Para todos aquellos que necesiten traducción simultánea pueden recoger los aparatos a la entrada. Y al final de la presentación habrá tiempo para que formulen sus preguntas, ya sea en español o en inglés, como ustedes deseen. Así que, sin más dilación, comenzamos con la presentación del informe. Robert Amsterdam.
Good morning, and thank you for coming.
Bueno, gracias por venir.
Coming to Spain, that I stand here in respect to the Spanish people. You underwent a national emergency last week, and as a country, you came together in a manner that we from North America can only salute and applaud. We, Chris and I, have between us 90 years of experience working in difficult countries in respect to both, in Chris's case, tax issues, and myself, human rights. I never imagined the need to come here to Spain to talk about human rights and tax together. I never imagined, nor did Chris, when we were first retained to discuss the plight of a number of executives who were caught under the Beckham law, that it would turn into an investigation of a system and an organization, Hacienda, that strikes fear in the heart of every Spaniard. We could not imagine the departure from rule of law that we saw in a member of the European Union. And as we dig deeper, as we meet more tax experts in this country, as we meet more victims, we want to announce to Hacienda that this case is no longer about simply Beckham. This case is about human dignity, the dignity of the Spanish people, and the fact that the impunity of Hacienda must end. It is enough, I think the Spanish term is basta, when it comes to having paid auditors, incentivized auditors, people who are literally able to benefit from your misery, people who are allegedly given the job of examining your taxes, who are literally motivated by the government to rain hell on the individual taxpayer. And how do they do that? How do they make life hell? Not only for Beckham taxpayers, but for all taxpayers. For Beckham people in particular, there are what I would call 4 stages of hell. First, you have to move to Spain, and then the government gives you a certificate. But in this age of divorce, many of you, when you receive a certificate, you think it's supposed to last your whole life. Little do you know that the Spanish government gives this to you and reduces your taxes, but it's only temporary. Because sure as hell, they're going to come after you, but they're not going to audit you when you're here in Spain and you're beginning your activities, as they should when they give you a certificate. They are going to audit you years later, when you've accumulated a lot of money and you're at tremendous risk of arbitrary loss of not only income, but even assets. So what's the second pillar of hell? Well, that's the incentivized auditors. That's the guy who comes at you with every motivation possible to extract the maximum amount of money. If you've done everything right, if you've got all your documents, and you've been a great taxpayer, you still lose. Because the government constantly uses this idea of simulación. Simulación is a concept in Spanish law that basically says if the auditor doesn't understand you, you're lying, you're creating a fraud, and therefore they can tax the hell out of you. That's the concept of simulación that is misused time and time again. The third stage of hell is after you're given an assessment that is incorrect. You either have to pay all the money or you have to lodge a form of guarantee, which is essentially, for many of us, the same thing. You lose control of all of that money during the appeal process. But it gets worse. Because not only do you tie up your money, you have to pay for lawyers, you have to deal with the reputational fallout that the government is going around asking questions of everyone you know, including writing requests to your home country so that your own government thinks you're a criminal. And this pay before playing in terms of appeal also involves our Spanish colleagues who have to go through the same thing. So those fighting Beckham and those here in Spain fighting Hacienda, it's the same process. And now, and I won't call this the last stage of hell, but it's an entry into hell, you go to administrative courts. Now, let me say something about the administrative courts. They are not independent at all. They are a waste of time. And worse, you don't have to rely on me for that. That's a judgment in the Santander case of the highest European court. So has the Spanish government done anything to repair this monstrosity relative to rule of law? No. They let it continue. They let people drag through the administrative courts for months or years. Why? Because they've got your money. This is the entire key to their departure from rule of law. To vouch, to win a case, and this is no disrespect to the Spanish courts, this is an issue of resource allocation. To win the case, you have to withstand 5 to 8 years of fighting and paying lawyers and all the reputational damage and having your customers get served with notices from Hacienda. So after you go through all of that hell, then maybe you have a chance of redeeming yourself. Well, this is not what anyone coming to this beautiful country bargained for. Nor is it what any Spanish citizen has bargained for based on the new, relatively new, I guess if you're old like me and Chris, relatively new Constitution of Spain, which guarantees you human dignity, which guarantees you security of the person. Tell it to the auditors who are constantly threatening Spanish citizens and foreigners with criminal charges. I often wonder why Spain is one of the only countries I know who takes celebrities that are honored in every other country and throws them into tax court. Everything I hear about Spain is about Shakira or Messi or these other people. Rather than protecting them, they triumph putting these personalities before the courts. And why do they do that? I have asked myself all the time, because these individuals reflect greatness of Spain. Why do they do it? Well, you know, it's like gangs or some Italian business associations. If they can get the scalp of a Shakira or a Messi, imagine how impotent you feel standing before Hacienda. And I'm going to suggest to you that for both Chris and I, this is not our first rodeo. We've gone up against governments many, many times. This is the first time I've ever had a government agency brief the press before we spoke, before we issued a white paper, and come out with numbers that are completely nonsensical. I cannot believe they say 200 Beckham folks have been taken down by Hacienda. Well, if that's true, Chris and I have gotten to know them all, which is just absolutely not possible. They say that the bonus is something, what is it, 1.4? 1.4. Well, again, you know, I don't want to use common language, but please, don't be so foolish as to make anyone believe that when you've just signed a deal for 125 million euros with these people to go get a certain amount of money, that's all that's involved. They would not be threatening people. They would not be ruining lives for 1.4% of their income. That's not what's going on here. And I think the Spanish government and Hacienda has to take a serious look at what they're doing to democracy in Spain. Because this is not about Beckham, this is about rule of law. And democracy cannot survive when any part of the government, any part of the ruling order can visit such fear and insecurity on the masses of people. And you know, I've done interviews and people have said to me, well, give us names. Who's doing this? Who are your clients? And I've said I would never give that up. I'm not dealing with a normal organization. I'm dealing with an organization that literally uses tax as a political instrument against their enemies, let alone what they'll do to poor foreigners. I will tell you, in this room are victims of Hacienda, but I won't point them out. But they're here, and they are spending their lives trying to recuperate the assets and earnings they had and the wealth they had before they had to come to Spain. So I'm not finished with you yet, but at this juncture, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Chris Wales.
Bueno, Pues toma ahora la palabra el profesor Chris Wales.
Now, Chris Wells will take the floor. As I said before, he was responsible for tax policies of the UK governments between 1997 and 2003 with Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. And since then, he's counseled over 20 countries around the world on tax policies.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Bob, for the introduction. I think the white paper speaks for itself. I know you haven't had a chance to go through it yet, but I think you'll find that when you do have a chance to go through it and to go through it closely, you'll see that it says a lot. This morning, there is a relatively small amount of time to present some key points from the report, but the report is quite substantial. I'd also say it's, as it says on the cover, it's an initial report. I've done initial reports before, and the good thing about initial reports is that you come back later and you give the second report and maybe the third report. This is our first report, and we had to cut it off at some point, but the material kept coming to us. The victims kept coming to us. And so the problem was, when do we stop? But we stopped. We've paused rather than stopped. The white paper, I think, is probably more eloquent than, well, I was going to say than Bob or I this morning. I'm not going to accuse Bob of not being eloquent. I'll restrict that comment to myself. The report is more eloquent than I'm likely to be this morning, and I'm going to try to be quite brief. We'll have time for questions afterwards, of course, and we'll be happy to answer lots of questions. I want to start by saying something that ought to be obvious, and that's that this paper and our work in general has nothing at all to do with party politics in Spain. There's a risk that we could be thought of as making an anti-government statement, a statement on behalf of the opposition, but we're not. Bob and I often tease each other about our personal political positions, which are arguably slightly different. I'm by nature a social democrat. I was privileged, as you've heard, to work within the government of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown as a member of the Council of Economic Advisors for more than 6 years, and in some sense was the author of their taxation strategy for that period. I have quite a long history of engagement on the left of politics, if you like, the centre left, of course. So Prime Minister Sanchez should really see me as a natural ally, and certainly not as an enemy. If somebody wants to label me as an enemy of the present government, they would be mistaken. Well, they'd be more than mistaken, they'd be wrong. But anyway, this is not a party political intervention. That's the point I want to make. Secondly, as you've heard from Carlos and a little bit from Bob, and as will be evident from my white hair, I've been around a bit. I've been around as an advisor in many countries, working mainly with finance ministries and tax authorities, and I should say mostly working with them or inside them, in Western Europe, in Eastern Europe, in Central Asia, in the Gulf states, a lot recently in Sub-Saharan Africa, and a whole bunch of islands as well in different parts of the world. I mostly work in countries where there are problems. It's not always fun to work in countries where there are problems, but that's mostly what I do. I've seen taxes that have been designed and implemented well, but mostly I've seen taxes and tax systems that have been, shall we say, designed less well than they should have been, and taxes that have been implemented very badly. In terms of implementation, I've seen aggressive tax authorities with inspectors inevitably chasing the targets that have been set for them. I've seen some very strange and interesting interpretations of domestic law in some countries that leave me simply saying, you can't possibly mean that. Generally, though, they do mean that. But in most of the countries that I've worked in, the system actually prevents them from putting those crazy interpretations into action. Crazy interpretations are seen in the hierarchy for what they are, and they're stopped. In this, as in other areas, Spain seems to be a little bit of an outlier. Checks and balances perhaps are a facade and maybe not as real as they should be. Turning to the Beckham Law, as we tend to call it because it's easy off the tongue, the Beckham Law has always been a badly designed incentive scheme, as will be apparent when you get a chance to read the white paper. One of the lessons that I tried to teach when I was in the UK government was that incentives really only work if they deliver certainty. People, and especially business people, don't commit unless they have certainty. The Constitution in Spain and EU law require certainty. They require legal certainty. The people who came to Spain, they and their employers, encouraged by the Beckham Law, thought that they had that benefit of that certainty. The words on the page seem to provide it. People believed they understood the rules and were well within them. But the tax authority, unfortunately, has operated it in a way that destroys that certainty, that makes the law at best capricious, and worse than that, it seems to have operated the law, as Bob says, as a trap. The white paper provides some examples. Unlike Bob, I'm not a human rights lawyer. I've often thought that when I grow up, I ought to be a human rights lawyer. It would be good fun, but so far I've not taken that plunge, maybe a little bit later. And I came into this work thinking of it largely as a technical exercise involving a dysfunctional tax incentive scheme with a typically tough revenue authority making a mockery of the policy objectives of the Ministry of Finance. I often see that. I almost saw it in the UK government, but I managed to head it off most of the time. A disconnect between policy and implementation that leaves taxpayers puzzled and confused and frustrated, and policymakers scratching their head about the low take-up of an incentive scheme. If you don't give certainty, you don't get take-up. Those elements are certainly present in the Beckham Law. I've rarely seen a high-profile incentive scheme so completely messed up by a tax authority. What's astonishing in Spain is that the Ministry of Finance hasn't taken responsibility for restoring order. The fundamentals of the scheme have been in place for more than 20 years now, so no one can just say it's a new scheme and everything still needs to bed down properly. Doesn't work as an excuse. I've spent just a few months looking at it, and I can already see how things need to be changed to deliver the results that the Ministry of Finance apparently wants and the certainty that the taxpayers need. It's absolutely not rocket science, and I don't claim to be a genius because I can see how you can do it. The tax authority has had years to learn and make changes, but has actually chosen to leave uncertainty in exactly the place where certainty should be. The things that cause most problems have never been addressed in all that time. And now, as we say back in the village, the chickens are coming home to roost. We're beginning to shine some light on what is happening under the skirts of the tax authority. As I looked at the way in which the law is being operated, it became clear this was not simply a technical assignment. There were some things that were fundamentally wrong about the way in which the Spanish tax authority works. I'm sure you know that already. I was prepared for some cultural differences. I see cultural differences all the time. And I expected them between Spain and some of the other countries that I've worked in, but I have to say, not of this type and not on this scale. Let me focus on a couple of issues that I believe are fundamental. Bob has touched on a little bit of this. I've read some of the works, some of the documents that have been produced by the Spanish tax inspectors. And if I wanted to remain completely polite, I'd simply say that I perceived a need for perhaps some additional training. If I put it more plainly, I probably shouldn't on live stream, but anyway, I would simply say that I was shocked by 4 things in particular. Let me just say briefly what they are. One of them is the manner of engagement with the taxpayer. Spanish tax inspectors need to be taught how to sit across the table from a taxpayer as equals, like other tax authorities do, and explain their case in both technical and human terms, rather than hiding behind a faceless computer system and what seems to be a mistaken presumption of veracity from which the organization benefits. It will contribute immensely to perceptions of fairness if there is seen to be a shift in the balance of power that restores a real presumption of innocence on the part of the taxpayer, as Article 24 of the Constitution requires. As I said, I was shocked by the very poor quality of the documents that I've seen, documents that the tax authority sends to taxpayers, a classic example of shiny modern systems, wonderful computer systems being used to deliver repetitive nonsense. I was shocked by the inspector's use of what looks like contrived arguments about simulación and the weaponization of the threat of criminal proceedings as a means of, shall we say, persuading taxpayers to do a deal. And fourthly, I was shocked by the interminable length of the documentation, sometimes 100 pages of close-written text sent to the taxpayer that adds up to nothing more than, I don't believe you. Endless, meaningless lists of figures and descriptions, the same words and phrases and case citations trotted out time and time again. Cut and paste, cut and paste. So much evidence of wasted time. They need to be taught, as other authorities know, to get quickly to the heart of the matter and to make their case concisely and precisely by reference to the law, not to dubious, broad concepts. If tax inspectors were paid by the number of words they use, this would be a natural result. But I know they're not, and you know they're not. Of course, in the white paper, we talk about the tax authority bonus scheme, including the latest one that Bob mentioned, that was signed off less than a month ago. Frankly, it's unbelievable. I just make 2 points in these opening comments. We did some comparative analysis that showed how much of an outlier Spain is on inspector bonuses compared with other countries. It's in the white paper. I recommend you have a look at it. Secondly, we puzzled over how to reconcile the numbers that are there in the bonus scheme with public statements made by the tax authority leadership about the relatively small contribution they make to inspector pay. We're reasonably smart people, but we couldn't make it all add up. In any case, the point is this: if you give incentives of any size whatsoever to inspectors to collect more taxes or to collect them by one means rather than another, as the tax authority does here, you eliminate completely, you eliminate 100% their objectivity and independence. And that's what's happened. And you make the system doubly dangerous for honest taxpayers when you fail to claw back the bonuses when taxpayers win their cases on appeal, as often seems to happen if people dare to go to court. The record of the tax authority here in winning and losing cases does not stand up when compared with almost any country you can think of. And we, again, include some examples in the white paper. So we ask in the white paper whether it would be a good idea to give a judge bonuses on the basis of the rate of convictions that they achieve. For the avoidance of doubt, it's not. It's not a good idea. But the example I like more is the police. What would happen if police officers were given a bonus linked to the number of arrests that they make? And the bonuses weren't clawed back if the people were subsequently released and not charged. Well, I'll leave that one to your imagination. I think that probably wouldn't be a good idea either. Anyway, returning to the core of our work, we provide a couple of illustrations in there. It's a long document. The illustrations are worth looking at. The first thing that we illustrate early on in the paper is the impact of a Beckham Law audit on the lives of 3 of the victims. They're all real people. We've obviously altered some basic facts because, like many people in Spain, they fear retribution by the tax authorities if they raise their head above the parapet. So they are there in the white paper in disguise. And secondly, if you get as far as Appendix 7, which is just before the end, we illustrate the financial impact for an impatriate of becoming an unexpected victim of an audit towards the end of their time in Spain. Again, it's really worth looking at. The numbers are in some sense made up, and they are typical numbers, but they show the impact, and the impact is absolutely fundamental to the future life of the individuals concerned. So let me just finish by saying all of this is actually fixable, but not, it seems, by the tax authority itself. They've had more than 20 years to fix it, and they haven't managed it. Some would argue that maybe it's a deliberate failure because the Beckham Law wouldn't be such a good money spinner if they fixed it. Personally, I very much hope that the Ministry of Finance has the will and the means to fix it. The policy is their baby. If they don't fix it, it will cease to have any incentive effect. I strongly suspect, actually, that the Beckham Law is close to being dead now. But there we are. You know, we'll see. Anyway, if it ceases to be an incentive, then there will be an impact on investment. Now, of course, the Spanish economy seems to be doing quite well at the moment. But the reality is that this is a change. If you look at the trend, as we show in the white paper over the last 20 years, the Spanish economy has largely underperformed a weakly underperforming EU. And it's only in 2024 and 2025 that things seemed to have picked up a bit. But unfortunately, when you look at things like per capita GDP, Spain has a huge long way to catch up. And the debt mountain is growing, investment is soft, youth unemployment is a very serious issue in Spain and needs significant attention. It's all there in the white paper. The IMF kindly echoed our thoughts just a couple of weeks ago when they came and did their annual Article 4 mission to Spain. They saw pretty much the same thing, the same concerns, the underlying concerns about the economy. But I don't really need to tell you that. You're all out there in your daily lives and you're talking to people in the street. People are under financial pressure and there are all sorts of causes for that. but the tax authority and the lack of investment are perhaps something that the government needs urgently to address. Personally, I'd be happy to sit down with the finance minister and make some suggestions. It's actually what I do all the time. It's my day job. I'd be happy to do it for Spain. I'd say tax authorities are important institutions of government, and I mean that very sincerely. They really are. And when the trust and confidence of citizens and investors reaches a tipping point, and you start to see fear of the tax authority, you cease to see it as a kind of collaborator. Governments tend to begin to have big problems. Anyway, what we're seeing the tax authority do with the Beckham law is regrettably just the tip of an iceberg. Hence, this 50,000-word document is also just the tip of the iceberg. It's just an initial report. And this is not just a problem for Beckham law people. We have a truckload of correspondence from people who are making a plea to us to help them. Most of them, not Beckham law people, but people completely crushed by the way in which the tax authority enforces the law. I'm not saying there's anything fundamentally wrong with tax policy in Spain. What I'm saying is that there's something fundamentally wrong with the way in which it's administered and managed in Spain. Everybody whom they would normally reach out to, these people who write to us, everybody they would normally reach out to is unfortunately too afraid of the tax authority, of the knock on the door, if they raise their heads. Anybody think that sounds familiar? Bob.
Muchas gracias, profesor Wales. Y por último, toma.
Thanks a lot, Professor Wales. And now we have some comments by Bob Amsterdam.
As somebody who has heard the knock on the door, being arrested in Moscow as I was in 2005, defending Yukos, I will tell you that I'm familiar with fear. But I will say this. I am shocked at the fear of tax professionals in Spain. I can tell you that a number of law firms will not speak to me. I can tell you a number of them that are helping me will not allow us to pay them. I can tell you a number that are working with us have said, if Hacienda finds out, I'll be audited within days. This is not normal in a free and democratic society. And I want to say something about Montero and others in the government who are going to tell you that they are going to get money from the rich. I will tell you, this is garbage. They're not getting money from the rich. They're getting money from schmucks like you and I. I don't know what the Spanish translation is, but normal people. And what has got, I think, both Chris and I deeply troubled are all of the correspondence we're getting from non-Beckham people who are saying, help us, help us. This morning, we got, literally an hour ago, we got this coming in. I have been fighting against the AT agency at Tributaria for 6 years after I sell my business, a blank in Madrid. Recently, I have won 2 trials against them. I can send all the information. My salary is being seized still now. My house, too. My mental health is not good because of the situation. There are thousands of Spanish citizens that we have been extorted. Thank you for this movement. If I can help, let me know. That's one of dozens Here's a policeman. The constant ordeal and persecution in my new job led them to garnish practically my entire salary, and I had to stop working because it's unacceptable. They even seized my car. This isn't normal, folks. What is going on in Spain is not normal. This is not democracy. This is not rule of law. This is an attack on democracy. I will tell you, the Hacienda is a shame on Spain. It is a disgrace. It is a national disgrace. I have been doing human rights work for 45 years, and if I was Spanish, I would want to know why it takes some guy from North America to stand up here and denounce the horror that is the terror with which this agency holds Spain. I represent people who can afford to fight, and we will fight. And we will go to every organization known to man. I want to give the people of Spain my assurance. We will not rest until somebody brings Hacienda to book, because this must end. It must end now. They need to understand, some political party in this country needs to understand that if they can put together the fear of the people into a political movement, they will actually have a majority and they might be able to pass a budget. I'm standing before you in a country with a dysfunctional government, not attacking any particular political party, but you guys haven't had a budget for the last number of years. I have countries I represent in Africa that have better governance than what I'm seeing in Spain without a budget for 3 years. Chris says the Tanzanian taxation system is one that Spaniards would envy. I mean, this is shameful. And the fact that they are so defensive that they've come out with statements about what we're saying before they've even seen the white paper is exactly what happens when you've got little children who are misbehaving. They come and apologize before you even know what they've done wrong. Well, we know what the Hacienda has done wrong. We know how they violate the human rights of Spanish citizens day after day, and it has to end. And it shouldn't befall people from overseas to come fight your fights. Spanish people need to stand up along with us to make this fight a reality. We shouldn't have to rely on foreign countries. Donald Trump is busy enough. We shouldn't have to bother him with this trade dispute. But I will tell you, we will not rest, not just because some of these clients I've known for many, many years, but because Juan, who writes to us, and our other friend who writes to us, can't be forgotten. When they go after the rich, when they go after the British, as they've done with real estate, be very careful. When they go after tourists, be very careful, Spain, about going after tourists, because thanks to your government, that's all you've got. Your entrepreneurial class is very low. Your manufacturing base is very low because your government has not matched incentives properly. And they've beaten up and kicked out the very entrepreneurs Spain should be attracting. Spain is going to need 24 million immigrants over the next few dozen years. Beckham is not the way to treat them, and Hacienda is absolutely not the way to mistreat them. Thank you very much.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Turno de preguntas.
Thanks a lot. We have a Q&A session. You can speak English or Spanish, as you wish.
This is Mercedes Arrayer from Voz Populi. Do you think Hacienda, the Spanish tax authority, is damaging the Spanish image, trademark, what we call Marca España, in the world? Or maybe some of your advertising may contribute to this damaging of the image of Spain? I don't know what you think about this. I would like to know if there's any law firm or any lawyer in Spain you may tell us you are working with, or it's impossible to know any name, or at least number of law firms or lawyers you may work with. And I would like to know if you are familiarized with Pedro Sánchez's brother, who claims to be a tax resident in Portugal, and he has no, Spanish tax authorities not questioning it or investigating this thing. Is there any double standard you may see? Thank you.
Sadly, as a lawyer, it's my misfortune to not know any member of Mr. Sanchez's family because they seem to have made lawyers quite busy as of late. I'm very cautious as a lawyer about commenting about particular cases which I know nothing about. And I think it would be improper. I very well understand that every case is unique, and I understand what the optics of the Sanchez case are, but out of respect, I'm not going to violate someone else's human dignity because I just don't know the facts. In respect to Spain's reputation, I would suggest that the behavior of the Hacienda is a national shame. The advertisements we've placed in many newspapers, and by the way, that we will continue to place. My goal is to ensure that this campaign continues until Hacienda changes its ways. We are providing facts. The Hacienda is constantly hiding. They're constantly throwing out numbers with no backup. We are very privileged to have Dr. Wales with us, one of the leading authorities in the world on tax policy, incredibly privileged. And for Dr. Wales to be as outraged as he is, and I want to be candid with you, I have asked the Hacienda for information. Our law firm is very old, and we do our homework. So one of the first things we did was communicate to Hacienda and ask for information. And we sent them a detailed letter. Now, their letters to poor people are 100 pages. We wrote to Hacienda a 2-page letter that they have been unable to answer because of their limited resources. So I can tell you that we will continue on this path until we are met with a result. We, and by the way, that's why Dr. Wales is here. We have brought leading experts in this field to work with the government. I'm not going to. I am not a tax expert. And you know, a number of people have asked me on these ads, are you looking for clients? And the answer is no. I would be doing a disservice to anyone to pretend that I'm going to practice Spanish tax law. Not anything I'm going to do. What I can say is, fortunately, human rights and EU law, these are things that are more general, because we are allowed as lawyers to analyze compliance with international treaties to which Spain is a signatory, and to mark their work compared to what their duties are under both international and domestic law. And Spain is failing. Spain is failing with regard to the Hacienda. Spain is failing with regard to foreign investors. They lose case after case with respect to investment tribunals and fail to pay. That's also in the white paper. Spain needs to get on the right side of governance and rule of law. And until that happens, I believe this campaign should continue.
I was just going to add a quick point to that. Bob's right, we've asked for data from the Director General of the Tax Authority. She opened up a correspondence with us. She wrote to us. We wrote back since she'd written to us. It seemed like a good idea. We asked her for information. She hasn't bothered to respond. It's probably 2 to 3 months since we wrote to her. normally the tax authority gives you 10 days to provide all of your financial details, maybe slightly less than that sometimes. There's a tremendous double standards going on here. The tax authority has put out some numbers this morning, which I think are completely insulting. I don't know how they expect anybody to believe them. You've got, they say that bonuses are just a tiny proportion of a taxpayer's pay. As Bob has illustrated, that can't possibly be the case. But it's not that so much that troubles me. Governments sometimes, go off the rails a bit and say things that maybe aren't quite right. But it's the absence of any kind of sense that you need to provide real data, real information to back up this statement. They think they can just come on and say, 70% of this, 30% of that, 1.4% of the other, and everybody's supposed to believe them. This presumption of veracity that the tax authority benefits from. Let them provide the same standard of evidence that they expect from a taxpayer. If you're a taxpayer, if you're a small business person in Spain, and the tax authority wants to look at your books, if you write back and say, I spent 70% on this and 1.4% on that, are they going to say, great, that's just what I wanted to know? No. They're going to say, show me. Where's the evidence? Where's the documentation? Give me the invoice. Let me match the VAT, the input VAT with the output VAT, But for them, no. We don't need to provide you with any information. We just, we can just say something and you believe it. That's how it works, isn't it? Well, it doesn't work like that for me. I think it should work like that for anybody else in the room.
Thank you very much. I'm one of those victims. I was thinking to come, and I traveled from abroad to come, and I'm one of those victims of Hacienda. And I was living like 25 years abroad with my companies and everything like that. And once Hacienda, they decided, because I have a couple of residences in Spain, they decided to say, okay, you are not living abroad, even if my wife and everything is abroad and my family and everything. And they try to, they do the best. A lot of things that people don't know, and I would like to say it, is Hacienda monitorizes the phones of the people. Why I do know it? It's very easy, because once I knew the number I had to pay to Hacienda, I called my agency. I said, okay, sell this house and we will pay it. Just like this. And 4 days later, all my residences in Spain were blocked. 4 days. Since that, I knew. I hide the phone because I give it to some specialists, and they said they hijacked your phone. This is one of the things. They monitorize me by people following me. Each time I came to Madrid, they follow. I have like evidences and everything. And this is people they don't know, because sometimes they use their phone or they contact with people, so they monitorize everything, everything. And this is, I had like a couple of times when I had with my lawyer going to Hacienda, and he says, they got this information. I said, it's impossible. I said, how do they know this information? I said, it's impossible. And after I said, oh, I just called like 2-3 hours before, and they just told us this. To be sure, I've done a test after. I said, okay, if they're listening, I will call somebody, and I'll ask to my lawyer, okay, go there and just tell me what they're going to tell you. And they exactly told them what I have told with my phone. So I had, and these people, they don't know. So I came, even I didn't know, but I was very in doubt to come. But this needs to be denounced. This bid needs to be denounced. And I'm still in with them in fight. So it's.
Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. And probably people of Hacienda are here.
No, I'm sure.
So this is for sure. I can tell you for sure. So they monitorize everything. So for sure.
Sí, bueno, ¿voy yo? ¿Vas tú?
Go ahead.
Rápido, buenos días. I've been for 30 years member of a Big Four. I'm a tax lawyer, right, working international tax planifications. I've been member of the Global Council of the firm for 10 years. No one of my ex-colleagues, former colleagues, perhaps are here. No one of them. Right. Second thing is it will not be easy at all to move or to change things just with complaining. And when I say complaining, even I'm mentioning in the tribunals, under the judgments. No way. When we move in Spain from dictadura to democracy, we had a big issue, a problem with the police. Our members of police were not educated in democracy. So they were not people respecting rights. And their voices either, same thing. Why not now we have a reasonable democrat police? Because we attacked individuals. We didn't attack the system. In this case, it's the same thing. It's like sexual abuses. We cannot attack the system because the system is so strong. Agencia tributaria is a power itself inside a power. It doesn't mind you change the government. They behave the same way. So in my opinion, we have only two tools, two instruments to success. And that one, the first one is to attack the individuals, the tax inspectors, the tax officials, that they misdo, they do corrupt practices, not the system. Because when we attack the individual policies in the past, the others start to feel fear, the same fear we feel now. So, and the second thing is to build, thing which I'm working, a real Consejo de Defensa del Contribuyente. We do have a formal, stupid, and useful Consejo de Defensa del Contribuyente that receives and resolves and answers claims. Crazy thing. It's better not to talk about it because it's a crazy thing. And why the individuals, not the system, the individuals act as they do? Because they feel impunity. They are not in any list. Can I ask you, who was the name of the inspector? You will not say it. There is not a list of people misdoing. As we do have a trip advisor, and you say this restaurant is good, this other is not good. I mean, this waiter was stupid and that one was a great waiter. As far as we don't have a legal and private list, database of people misdoing, we will not success. Those are the two tools I believe on them, and I don't believe just in complaining about the system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Juan de Portillo from Expansión, the Spanish business newspaper. Thank you for the question. I have several questions. First of all, I would like to know how many clients do you have till now in Spain in this fight against Hacienda. I also would like to know if you are already working on a class action. And in that case, how many people do you have in it till now? And if do you have any particular goal, any particular amount of clients do you need to present it? I said so too because the paper talks about an extraordinary wave of attacks, but Hacienda says that they have only had tax inspection in 0.5% of the 37,000 of people under the vacant law. It doesn't sound so extraordinary. I don't know, what do you think about it? And finally, has been those campaigns ordered by any particular client? Thank you very much.
So what I will say is, I won't give out names or numbers of clients, given the behavior of Hacienda. We are considering a sort of unlimited number of places to litigate. Obviously, every agency in terms of the European Union, and obviously whatever trade issues can be used. We will announce them after we have obtained a lot more evidence from victims. So we are going to come back to Spain. We are going to hold town halls. We are going to ask Spanish citizens to come forward and provide their testimony. I think my colleague's comment is very well put. We should be asking for names of inspectors. You're right, going after a system alone is very difficult. When you're dealing at the level of states and trade, then you have to go after the system. And one of the major ways to force reform, by the way, is to use the trade angle, to use the fact that it is a non-tariff barrier to trade, because we may be able to, from the top, affect a change that we would not be able to otherwise. But in any event, we will be going to the EU and raising this tremendous departure from European values that this climate of fear represents. And the reason for the ads is exactly that. What exists in Spain is a climate of fear and a repressive hacienda. The world needs to know, because repression only operates when it's unknown. When you shine a light on repression, it becomes far more difficult in a democracy to operate. And Spain has real democratic traditions, a real constitution, a real judiciary. It's the hacienda and their tribunals that are threats to democracy. So they need to be reformed. And as I said, you know, Chris is here and happy to speak to whoever. We will obviously do what we have to do to assist, as I said, not only our clients, but todos, all the Spanish people, so that this reign of fear ends. Chris?
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on the data issue, because you raised the point that the tax authority has said only 0.5% of 37,000 Beckham law people over 20 years or something have been audited. As I said before, you know, what about the underlying data? Let's have a look at the underlying data. If you look at the white paper, you will see that we have listed the questions that we have asked the Director General, which would, if she responded to it, which would provide quite a lot of data about audit cases. And I think it's extraordinary, but actually in the context of the way in which the tax authority operates, I think it's entirely typical that they can ignore a request for information, for data, and it's not just us. You know, freedom of information requests that go to the tax authority. What does the tax authority say? It says, we can't be bothered to provide a report. We're not here to give a report to taxpayers. What are they here for then? You know, they have lots of data. Why would you not publish it? Tax authorities are supposed to be transparent. I can't think of any of the tax authorities that I work with that would turn to taxpayers and say, we're not going to provide that information, we can't be bothered. You know, we'd have to do a bit of work in order to give you the numbers. In our case, they haven't even bothered to reply. The lady opens the correspondence with us, and we ask her for some numbers, and she can't even give us the courtesy of saying, well, actually, we're a bit busy at the moment, so we can't manage to reply just yet. Just wait a while. You know, it's discourteous. We replied to her letter. She didn't reply to ours. It's an attitudinal thing. As somebody said, I think in a Granada declaration some years ago, the tax authorities here think that people are subjects, not citizens. They are subjects. Now, I'm not a big believer in the monarchy, and I say that as a Brit in a monarchy, but I don't like to think that the tax authority thinks that people are subjects. That's not how it is. People are free. People are citizens. They are free citizens. They're entitled to information. What the tax authority has put out today is not information as you would define information. It's entirely flim-flam. It's nothing, you know. If they can provide some real data, if they'll sit down with me, as I said, across the table and share the real data with me, then I'll have a look at it with them. And I'm a perfectly reasonable person. I work with governments all the time. I'm happy to give them some thoughts about the numbers, and then I think they should be published. What do you think? You know, I think there's lots of data that could be published by the government, by the tax authority, that currently isn't published. If you want to keep the lid on things, you don't publish data that may give rise to questions. Bob knows all about that.
Yeah, it was pretty amusing to me that the day of this press conference, they decided to release numbers when we've been begging them for it for months. It's also very clear that they provide the end number without providing any of the facts. They don't actually give you the information. And it's one of the things about Hacienda, I understand, goes on almost generationally, that they keep everything together, they keep everything tight. And what I hope is during the litigation process over the next number of months or years, we'll force some information out of them to find out actually what inspectors are getting paid. Because I fail to believe any inspector would carry on the way they carry on today for 1.4% of a civil service income. It's just absolutely defies imagination that you threaten your fellow citizen, you invent charges. It's not going to. You're not going to do that for 1.4% of anything.
Okay, it's on. James Badcock from The Telegraph, hello. And thank you for the presentation. A little question for Chris, picking up on something he said, which was that people, when they find themselves on the wrong end of Hacienda, don't reach out to the usual, the usual agencies or the usual options because they're too scared to do anything, to raise their heads above the parapet. I'd just like you to be a bit more specific about who is no use and should be some use to victims, and if possible, your impression on, is that very unusual? Have you seen anything like that anywhere else? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I certainly haven't seen anywhere where, and admittedly, I've only worked in 30 or 40 countries. I haven't worked in 192. So, my sampling is limited. But I haven't seen in any of those countries a situation where professional firms are turning down clients because they're afraid of the tax authority. I think that, for me, as Bob says, the pressure on professional firms is symptomatic of the problem here. Now, lots of people can't afford to go to lawyers anyway. There are lots of small business people in Spain who seem to be under significant pressure from the tax authority. I don't know all the details, obviously, but people are under pressure. Where do they really go to? How do they get help? I get the impression that there's almost nowhere you can go to get help because everybody is afraid. Everybody is afraid that if you stand up, you get your own door knocked on. I think that's a pretty desperate situation, frankly, for a country like Spain. I can't think of anywhere else where that would be the case. So I can't give you a comparative to that. People need help with the tax authorities. I mean, one point I'd just like to make, which all of you, I think, would be familiar with, and that's the fact that, of course, in Spain you have a self-assessment system. So everybody has to fill in their own forms. Now, I personally, I've been doing tax since I was quite a bit younger, and I hate filling in forms. And forms, particularly online forms, maybe it's just my age, but online forms I completely hate, because often the answer isn't yes or no or a specific amount. There's actually an explanation you need to give, and often the form is quite difficult to fill in. And so I, on my forms from His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, I sometimes, type in lots of notes and things to explain what all this is about, because frankly, I'm not quite sure what I ought to have put here, even though there are lots and lots of notes. Now, in Spain, it seems to me that that all of the burden of getting things 100% right is on the taxpayer. And the slightest little error that you make is pounced on immediately, and if not criminalized, is regarded as an attempt to hoodwink the tax authority, perhaps even ultimately to commit fraud, when actually you just weren't quite sure what this was about. Most people mercifully are not tax experts, but self-assessment techniques often push people into areas where they're very uncomfortable, and this seems to be particularly the case in Spain. Now, going back to my example of Chris Wales filing a tax return in the UK, I know that if I've screwed something up and really didn't mean to, I'm just going to get a letter from HMRC, and they're going to say, actually, I think that's not the right number, or I think you should do something different. They're not going to come and audit me and ask for my blood or my firstborn son as a sacrifice. They're simply going to ask me to look at the number again, because it ought to be put in this way. That doesn't seem to happen here. The audit process, from everything I've seen of it, is a terrifying process, an ordeal for ordinary citizens. That's why people are afraid of it, and that's why it's used as what seems like a punishment sometimes. And we've had some quite disturbing reports from some people of the politicized audit, the audit that results when, and I'm not attaching this to any particular administration, but the audit that happens when you've done something in a public position, not a government position, but a public position that the government didn't like, you get suddenly audited. Well, and the people who stood next to you get audited as well. Of course, it's probably a coincidence, but just something to think about.
Well, in fact, let's be really clear. We've had people come to us who have been victims of political audits. We can't even describe the circumstances because we have to keep it anonymous. But I think there's a famous case now going on in Madrid concerning tax information that's been released, the Ayuso case. I would say, adding on to what Chris said, having worked in dozens of countries and actually being banned from 7 or 8, I would tell you I've never seen fear like I see among Spanish professionals. I mean, I represent opposition groups in countries where, today there's a hearing for one of my clients in the European Parliament, Tundu Lisu. In any of these countries, I have never been turned down as a lawyer looking for help or assistance for clients, the situation I've experienced in Spain, where people will say to me, if I work with you, I'll be audited. I can't afford it. My firm can't afford it. The level of fear in Spain, given that it's a European democracy, is something that I cannot even explain.
Bueno, tenemos que ir concluyendo, pero bueno, ustedes han estado esperando, entonces.
Well, we should be closing, but you've been waiting, so. Well, good morning. I'll be speaking in Spanish. I'm Carmen Obregón of the USETIC. And regarding the case you just mentioned of the partner of the president of the region of Madrid, I'd like to know whether you would take that case, take over that case, if you could help this person to solve a battle they have with the general attorney of Spain. And secondly, I'd like to know at what point Spain has gotten into this trend of chasing auditors, tax chasing auditors. If there's any honest inspector, because it seems we are living in Burkina Faso, because many of them, they complain because of the pressures they receive within the Hacienda.
I know the case, yeah. Well, in terms of Ayuso's partner, I think the Ayuso case is a very, very important case. I'm not a Spanish lawyer, and as interesting as it is, I don't think it would be up my alley. In respect to the timing of the haciendas, for instance, the auditors changing in becoming more aggressive in tone, I don't want to speak for Chris, but I believe Chris and I have been told that there has been a significant change in tone over the last 10 years, that the situation in respect to auditors has gotten worse. Chris, am I right?
What I'd say, because I'm one of those people who doesn't like to say anything unless they've got all the facts, I honestly don't know. The anecdotal evidence that we have suggests that there has been a toughening of the approach. I cannot verify that from data that I have available. All I can do is say that there seems to have been a significant trend in that toughening. So whether that coincides with particular audit plans that the tax authority has for particular years, I can't say exactly. We don't have, as I said a couple of times, we don't have reliable data from the tax authority to enable us to answer that question precisely. Personally, I think there is some toughening up, but I can't absolutely say that's happening. As governments get under pressure for more revenue, they do things that they might not otherwise do. As tax administrations get under more pressure, they do things that they absolutely should not do. I can give you a lovely example from Uganda, where the tax authority needed to collect another 1.5 trillion shillings it's kind of meaningless in euro terms, but it's quite a lot of money. And they'd been told to go and get it from the informal economy, and so they tried. Yeah, it was an interesting process. Most of the people they tried to get money from have got no money at all. Now, of course, the easiest thing to do if you're a tax administration under pressure is to get more money from people who regularly pay taxes. And Spain has its own informal economy. We use some figures from 2 or 3 years ago, maybe more than that, in the white paper. I think we set a range of kind of 15 to 20% of the economy in Spain being informal. I'm not sure whether that's true today. I've seen the informal economy in lots of countries, but I can't really say whether that's right or not. The thing about people in the informal economy is that they're actually quite difficult to get tax revenue from, because they hide. They are hidden. That's what it's about. You know, it's activity that's in the shadows. The one thing about Beckham law people is that they're absolutely not in the shadows. They arrive in Spain and they put their hand up and say, here I am, I'm a taxpayer, I'd like to be taxed under this law, please. But here I am, this is my address, this is my employer. The one thing that they are, in general, is compliance. They're people with a compliance history. If you look at, and again we've got some numbers in the white paper, if you look at the average amount of tax paid by Beckham law people over, I've forgotten which year it is, but it's something like 45,000 euros per individual. If you look across the population of Spain and say, how does the amount paid by Beckham law people compare with other people? Well, you know, there's maybe a bit of a difference. And it's not the Beckham law people who are paying less. So my point is really this. You can, if you're in Uganda, you go and try and get lots and lots of money from people who've got almost nothing but are street traders in an attempt to meet your revenue targets. And you don't get a bonus, by the way. If you're in Spain, who do you target? You target people that you know about, people who are there, people who are properly tax registered, people identifiable, and you try and get money from them. It's quite easy, really, isn't it? I mean, Beckham law people, probably the most visible of all people. If you're a tax authority trying to chase a target and an inspector looking for a bonus, yeah, why not have a go? These guys are foreign. You know, they're probably cheating us anyway, nasty foreigners, they've probably taken our jobs. You know, let's get some more money from them. What can I say?
Bueno, no sé si se me oye. Una última pregunta que se me había olvidado antes.
I don't know if you can hear me. Just one last question. Have you had any contact with the Association of Tax Auditors in Spain in order to share with them your work?
No, not yet. We certainly hope to.
We have, however, noticed the interest that the Association of Tax Advisors have shown in for example, inspector bonuses. And I think it's thanks to their work that the tax authority was finally in 2022 persuaded by a Madrid court to release a little bit of information. Obviously, not all the information, but a little bit of information about the bonus scheme. But they're very coy about providing the details. It's puzzling, isn't it? You know, it's obviously being paid for out of taxpayer money, and yet you're not allowed to know. Okay.
Tenemos tiempo para una última pregunta, por favor.
And very fast question. In case someone from Hacienda is around here, I love you all guys. Great persons. But to be serious, I don't know if it's already answered, you don't have to now. But my question is about the specific outputs about this, out from this initiative. What can we get out of this?
Look,
specifically, if it is in the white paper, I can go through it later on. So don't worry about that.
It's in the white paper, but I would say to you, we will be going to various European agencies and courts as a start, except we also want to get more testimonies from Spanish citizens about the situation they face. So thank you all very, very much for coming. Thank you.
Bueno, muchas gracias por venir. Les remitimos al informe que se pueden, por supuesto, llevar ustedes, tanto en inglés como en español.
Well,
Y a
thanks
la
a lot
página
for
web en la
coming.
que
You
pueden
can
contactar
now
con el
read
despacho. Muchísimas gracias.
the white paper. Thanks a lot.
Well, that went a lot longer than I thought.